Number 7, a Saw fan found footage film, kind of like the Jigsaw Blogs. What's up, Jacob? Thank you for coming back here on SAW-Tober, where we're counting down the 9 pitches that we all came up with and voted on secretly, I might add. Maybe we're going to have to ask people what they think about all these at the end of the day, but I want to really jump in here because we were just talking before, all of this, before we started doing it. This is a little bit confusing to me because you didn't put up a pitch, but you have your channel, which I'm going to direct everybody into the description section, in which you've pretty much been doing this for like the last year and a half. Like you've been doing what you've set out here to do or what you think they can be done in a much bigger scale on your channel as a fan, showing that it could work and it could be really interesting. So first and foremost, if this was, for anyone who hasn't watched the show yet, go watch the show. It's really intriguing, and I'm pretty sure a couple episodes are coming out along with all this. I know the whole SAW-Tober thing has made it super hard, but where do you feel like this comes into play? How do you feel you get to...
I think one of the beauties about the Saw franchise is just this, because of the story itself, you can almost put any character in it, and then it'd be interesting to see what their reactions would be to the world of Saw. Like in my TV show, I built a character around myself who's actually a history teacher, and what would a history teacher in that city think of all the Jigsaw attacks? And then we find out that they're actually a fan of Jigsaw. So in a way, I was kind of inspired by kind of like the Scott Tibbs documentary, and we kind of seen that kind of done already with the Scott Tibbs documentary, where there's like someone who's a fan of John Kramer in their own way and want to document all the events. So an idea you could put towards film on this is you could create any character. It could be anybody. It could be a teacher. It could be just a hardcore Saw fan. It could be a punk rocker. It could be just a historian. It could be anybody that would be fascinated with the John Kramer character. And then you could create a world. Like, for instance, what I do in my show is I have my character of Jacob, and then he decides to go out and explore and try to answer as many questions as he can to fill a narrative. Kind of way like creating a documentary in a way of some sorts of all the events that have happened in this world. And that way you can bring back characters and callbacks to other films. So maybe this film could be kind of like, almost in a weird way, kind of like a Paranormal Activity kind of thing, where, you would film events based off that would happen. Or maybe like a person can just explore ideas and go find like missing saw traps. Or if they go to the Jigsaw Rules website, and then they can play the events of the traps from there, and that's how your film could incorporate saw traps based on what people find and post on the internet. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially kind of what the idea of how a Saw fan footage film can work, where you can use like the Jigsaw Rules website. You can incorporate, traps that would be found by other people. You can have people who are just want to be inspired and create Jigsaw's work themselves and try to maybe film someone they're stalking, and then film themselves kidnapping them, film themselves putting them in traps, filming the traps themselves, and then posting it online. And just stuff like that, where you can create a narrative just with the Jigsaw Rules website and the dark web, and just explore Saw in this new avenue.
I really like that idea, actually. What's really interesting to me is, first and foremost, being found footage, it doesn't have to be very expensive. And I've been saying this to you for years, and I'm pretty sure I've been shouting it off the rooftops with my channel, that I think the Saw franchise can survive a direct-to-video sequel. I mean, it doesn't have to be a main thing. It could be a spin-off like Spiral, something in the Book of Saw, where you're doing like a found footage film in the way that you suggested, as a way of not only keeping the brand alive for hardcore fans. Who cares? Like, the people in the general audience aren't going to care if it goes to video. It's not going to diminish one going to theaters anytime soon, but the hardcore fans, seeing that kind of come out and having a way to explore this world a little bit more. One of the biggest problems I have with the Saw franchise is it's spent so many years, almost intentionally so, being cooped up in rooms and in buildings and all these other places, like literally underground, that the world itself doesn't feel lived in. If there's one reason why I think you and myself love Eleanor and even Logan to any extent is because those characters feel like they have lives outside of what's going on in Jigsaw's world because they're so far detached from it because it happened like more than a decade ago, you know? So, and I guess the same thing can be said about, you know, Zeke and maybe William, all these other characters that we've met in the last two films. And this would just be another way of exploring it just a little bit more. I have a bit of a pitch for you, though. Tell me what you think about this. We're getting a little bit off track here, but take this idea, what you're talking about, someone exploring the traps, exploring the world, doing their own research, trying to put it all together. But you use that found footage element as a backdrop during a bigger Saw series documentary. Kind of like the Camp Crystal Lake memories they have with Friday the 13th, where they have these kind of intercutting segments between the interviews with all of the movies, where they cut to the camp and they redo a scene from one of the old movies or something with all the older actors or something like that. But instead of doing something campy, you create something a little bit bigger in the world that tell this story during the events of, you know, all these really long segment interviews with every single movie, bringing in the directors, the producers, the writers, and all these actors who played in it to talk about their experience making in each individual one.
I think that should work. You know, it's just one of those things where, you know, based off the world of Saw, like, you know, anything can happen because, like you said, it was so self-contained. It was kept his characters, you know, like grounded down in some of these elements to where, you know, anything's possible. Like, you know, anything can happen in this world. If you want to see an example, like, you know, of the pitch work, just go check out my show. It's a really fun idea. Like, you know, like, so I'm having a blast making this show. It's like, if you gave me, you know, the Saw world, what would I do with it? And it's just an example. Like, you know, I'll be honest, people, you know, I'm not an actor. I'm not an editor. I'm not a grand storyteller or nothing like that, or screenwriter. But, you know, if you give me a world based off what Saw does and what it has, and if you allow, like, a fan, just a simple fan of the franchise, it could be like a Joe Smo like me, or a big-time director can come in and just do whatever you want with it, because that's why it could work, because Saw was so contained, and then you could branch its world out and do various things with it and connect it to different ways. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I do with my show, and I'm having a blast making these episodes, going back, trying to fix holes. And because Saw is like a very, you know, crafted story, like I can plug this event into this event, or I can answer this question this way, or I could take a character such as, you know, Corbin Denland, which I just did in my last episode. Go check it out. And we see, you know, what happened to her after the events of Saw 3 through 6. And there's a story you can tell with that character. And there's stories you can tell with other characters in this franchise that people usually can take for granted.
I completely agree. I think that's a really interesting direction for the future of the franchise. And like I said, doesn't have to cost a lot, doesn't have to be on the big screen or anything. It could just be for the fans. That I would really actually prefer that. We are so far and away from the golden age of horror movie creations and icons that we don't get what they got with Michael and Jason and Freddy. You don't have this extended universe of comic books and novels and all these other things to develop these characters. Saw's been fairly barren. Yes, we've had video games and comic books and all this other stuff that's been retconned or never was ever canon, but anything to make the world feel a little bit bigger, I think, would be interesting, even if it doesn't have traps or twist ending or whatever, you know?
Exactly. And so, like I said, you know, if you're looking to see an example of this pitch, go ahead and check out my show. It's, like I said, I encourage you all, you know, you have made to ignore all the, you know, rookie editing errors and acting and stuff like that. But, you know, just, if you want to do this your own, I see other things, you know, I see tons of Saw fan films online. It doesn't have to be my show. Go to YouTube, type in Saw fan films, look at what other people are doing with this franchise, making traps, making stories and stuff like that. So feel free to, you know, check in. There's plenty more coming out. It's not just me. There's plenty more stuff coming out. So go ahead and check it out, people.
All right. So guys, going to leave it at that. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. It's been real.